Blessings to you. I hope you've been having a prosperous day so far, and I pray the rest of your day goes well. Or if you're checking this out at night, I pray that you sleep well. All right, my name is Nigel Daring. I am the author of the originator of the philosophy of Darinism or Darinism. Um, it's a philosophy based upon analysis of Genesis chapters 1, 2, and 3, which I correlate to an analysis of existence in general. And I use my analyses to, to basically say that what's represented in Genesis chapters 1, 2, and 3 is reality. And if we pay attention to it, we can come to understand existence, and we can come to understand our lives, and we can even make our lives better by wrestling with what we're seeing there, and what it is our reality is. And so that's the basic idea of Darwinism. Um, I did 8 previous presentations. I hope you'll check them out, or some of them out, because I'll try to do each presentation where I'm building on the prior one. Um, I have a book called Existence, God, Man, Society, and Nature, which you're seeing in the background. You can find that on Amazon.com. You just type in the name of the book, or you can type in my name, Nigel Daring. You'll see 16 books come up, and that's one of the books. You can check it out, where I'm basically fleshing out my philosophy. All right. Today I'm going to look more at insecurity and self-consciousness. Insecurity we spoke about. Now I want to talk about self-consciousness, but before, let's do some review from what we did last time. Last time we looked at some more effects of the great ego chase, the chase that the devil encouraged Adam and Eve to go on, to go assume this ego, this sense of self, um, whereby they can find themselves imitating God, and they're going to do that through flesh. The tree of knowledge of good and evil is their physical form. Um, along with an array of um, problems, amongst the array of problems, here are some of them. Um, when we're chasing ego, and mankind is chasing ego, what he ends up, this false ego, this false sense of self that he's trying to be, he ends up oppressing people. Right? There's a loss of humanity. You're oppressing nature. You're destroying nature. You're harming the animals and the flora and the fauna, the ecosystems. Okay, polluting the earth. Right? You end up oppressing um, other human beings, um, just chasing this false sense of self. You're not living at peace within yourself, and you end up not living at peace without yourself, that outside of yourself. Then that great chase leads to the hierarchical ranked order structures we find in civilized societies, in ranked order societies, these socio-economic and political structures, whereby you have this notion of better than, right? And inferiority and superiority. It came from the very outset of the sin. In the natural state of relationships between human beings, there's equality. But once the sin occurred, that's when God um, showed them the effect of it and said to Eve, he's going to rule over you. Your husband is going to rule over you. So the equitable and egalitarian existence that you guys had, the equitable relationship, the egalitarian existence that you had, that will no longer be true, right? So what that chase of the ego brings in is this. It brings in this sense of rank, right? That of better than, that there's this notion of better than, and it affects the society. It affect once they're within a culture. Once people start chasing ego, that's when the society transforms and becomes ranked order, hierarchical. Okay, off this notion of chasing ego, you get this ranked order, better than, people ruling over each other, and then along with that goes the abuse. Okay, because if you're considering, if you're a person considering somebody less than you, then you're liable to abuse that person because you're feeling that they're not quite um, human as you are. So you end up with a state of inhumanity, eh, because of evil, um, because of the sin that Adam and Eve engaged in and which they introduced into the world. You also end up with a twisted psychology where you're seeing evil as good and good as evil, right? Adam, when Adam sinned at the very outset, right? What he should have done when God called out to him, when his voice, the voice of conscience, the voice of truth called out to him, what he should have done was say, listen, I sinned. I apologize. I did not obey you. That's not what he did. He saw value in the evil. So the evil to him is a good. What the devil introduced to him, this idea of being his own God, that's good. So and that ego trip that he's going on, he sees it as good. And so that's this concept he introduced this concept into humanity where we're seeing evil as good and good as evil. The 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 conqueror who goes out to conquer and in this idea, because he has this idea in his mind that he's establishing a kingdom, an empire, and he's going to conquer people and devour them and stuff. So he's seeing the greatness and the glory of it all. In the meantime, what he's doing is this inhumane thing of destroying people's lives, of harming people unnecessarily. Why go kill people and devour them when you could actually be living in harmony with them, sharing your culture with them, and they share their culture with you? But that's not his concept. His concept is this, that he's on this ego trip where he's trying to establish greatness because he's trying to mimic God. Okay? So you get this twisted psychology. Man sees good as evil and evil as good. When people are building, when they see nature in its pristine state, they're not seeing it as something that should be appreciated. What they and seeing it and something that should be revered, and thinking, oh, God created us. Oh my, this ought to be preserved and respected the way God intended, because when he put man in the garden, man was there to tend and care for the garden, right? To show respect for nature. Man has this twisted psychology now, so he sees this pristine environment and he cuts down the trees. Well, he said, well, the trees can be utilized. The land can be utilized, and he builds up all these concrete structures and stuff, and he says, oh, this is development. It is actually destruction. So man is in a state where he's seeing the evil of what he's doing as good, and good as evil. All right. And in that state, nature even becomes an offense, because in his unrealistic chase after an ego, he's chasing. He wants to distance himself from his nature, right? Which is the nature God gave him, which in effect translates to him distancing himself from nature. Period. He's into this unnatural state of self, because nature is God. And he's trying to distance himself from God, to be his own God. So nature sort of becomes an offense. It's only something to be used. Now, here's the other effect that we pointed out also, or one of amongst the effects, is this greed. Greed comes in, this endless and restless search. What the ego that the devil presented man, and that he introduced and man conceived, is a false ego. It's a false sense of self. It can never be attained. So what man is doing is chasing perennially after the sense of self, for which there can be no terminal point, because you never achieve the godlike state. You can never in the physical realm be God. Okay? There's no way man is going to be God. So man ends up chasing a lie, and it's an illusion, and he keeps chasing it, chasing it, chasing it, and that's where we get this greed that's germane to man's current existence, man's worldwide existence. All right, the profit motive, going for profit, for more, the capitalist motive, right? Of searching for more, making more money and more money and more money, and that's how they say you're increasing your value. This is how man is conceiving of himself, increasing his value through material terms, and thinking that the more of it that he gets, the better he's going to be, and more godlike and divine, because he's more powerful in some concept of his, in his concept, which in reality is not. It's an illusion. It's an illusory sense of self. All right. Now let's move on. Now I just wanted to point out a couple of things here. This forbidden tree, right? Which I pointed out, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which is man's physical form. It is itself not responsible. It's not responsible for man's sin. It is just a tree that's there. Our physical form is just there. It is not responsible for our sin. Okay, it's not responsible for our weakness. What is responsible is our spirit, our psychology, our thinking, our state of consciousness. Okay? When Adam touched the tree, it looks like it was the tree that made them insecure. Right? When Adam and Eve touched the tree, it looked like that's what made them insecure. That it wasn't the tree that did it. It wasn't the tree of knowledge and evil that did it. What made them insecure was their acceptance, their very acceptance of the idea that the devil presented them. Once they accepted the idea that they should be something else, then whatever the self that they have, they haven't accepted it. They're looking at it as something wrong with who they are. Right? There is something wrong with me. That's the idea. God made them perfect. There's nothing actually wrong with them. But then they get this idea, however, that there is something wrong. Right? So they actually develop this insecurity in who they are. So they were insecure before they even touched the tree. What the tree did when they touched it was it manifested their insecurity in time and space. So the psychology, their consciousness, the state of mind that they had, right, that they had internally, it became something outward. They looked at themselves. They were insecure in spirit, so it manifested in flesh. So once they touched the tree, they touched it with an intention. They had a state of mind touching it. Their state of mind was that they were insecure because they accepted the idea. So when they touched the tree just manifested their insecurity. So when they were touching the tree for greatness, to use it for greatness, it's all, and they're seeing it as a tool for greatness to achieve what the devil told them they could achieve. What it was also doing, it was manifesting their psychology of their insecurity. So immediately as they touched it, looking for greatness, they're seeing their nakedness. They're seeing, oh my God, right? So now what happens? Now let's even go back even further. Why did they even accept the idea in the first place that the devil gave them? And I pointed out before that this was something buried in their consciousness. I pointed out that we existed in spirit before we even came here, before the physical realm was formed. We were in spirit, and we existed in spirit as a consciousness. Consciousness defines our ego, our sense, a conceptual state of self. That self is real because it's a conceptual presence, and it exists. And we were in that state, in that spiritual state, in that consciousness, in the realm of God, along in His kingdom. But there is something buried in our consciousness that there was this potential for us to do evil. It wasn't going to manifest in the kingdom of God. We saw God in His glory. We saw the kingdom. We weren't going to challenge God. We weren't inspired. The notion never entered our mind. So what God did was he gave us an opportunity through physical existence for that evil to manifest. Now, what I pointed out also, yes, it's this opportunity to manifest that evil, but it's also an opportunity for us to get rid of it. There's no obligation for any of us to live in a state of evil that's inside of us. We can get rid of it. You know why? God never made any of us evil. He made us good. He made us in reflection of His image. So we can get rid of the evil inside of us. How can we do it? We have to look inside our consciousness. It's in our consciousness that where we have the origin of evil. We're not when we are finding ourselves evil, it's because we're not processing existence right. We've stepped outside the natural order of existence which God established, and we're chasing some identity that we don't need to be chasing. Now, what I'm pointing to also is sometimes you hear some people say when they're caught in a life of evil, and they say, well, you know what, I was born this way. I always felt this way. Now, there are two aspects to it. First of all, they came out of the womb and with this evil inside of them. That's because they had this evil buried inside of them in their consciousness before they came here. And being born upon earth, they allowed the condition of being in the physical realm to allow it to manifest. And so whatever is in their consciousness, right, it reflects in your body. Your body senses what's in your spirit. Your body is a reflection of who you are spiritually. So yes, they can say, "Oh, I've been feeling it since birth," but But the truth is, that's no obligation to tie yourself to evil, right? Being born and sensing a certain state of evil since birth is no excuse for living a life of evil, right? Because it's in your consciousness, you need to get rid of it. Okay, so yes, people can say they were born with it, right? But yes, it was in their consciousness since birth. But in the other aspect to it is that nobody is made evil. So even though they came into the world and they sense, they sense that they were conceived in sin, right? They're not actually in their actual nature that God made them. They're not actually evil. The natural being is not evil. There's nothing incomplete, improper, unholy about how God made anyone naturally. What happens is that the unnatural aspect comes from how we're processing existence, and once we start processing it naturally or harbor within our consciousness, deep within our consciousness, some evil, some resentment of God, some desire to chase some other self, that's where we start afflicting our pure nature with these unnatural desires, okay, and unnatural conduct. All right. So Adam and Eve, um, it wasn't a tree of knowledge of good and evil that actually made them self-conscious. All it did was reflect their spiritual state. They were already self-conscious and insecure before they touched the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because they accepted this idea from the devil. But why did they accept it? Because they were already prone to accepting it, because it was deep within their consciousness. No, just to point out that this idea that was introduced at the outset, right? This the devil's idea, be your own God, declare your independence from God. You don't have to listen to him. You right? You can think for yourself, have your own truth. It's introduced as a seed. That means it's in some primal state as man came upon earth, and it's always there with man. What happens is that it's been nurtured throughout the ages. It's been developed. So Adam and Eve getting this idea, they weren't immediately going to necessarily start chopping down trees and building up civilizations and stuff like that. But that idea that they had, they passed it on to their children, right? Because you take from your parents, believe it or not, you copy their ideology, because they pass it on to you, right? So by Adam and Eve just cloaking themselves, even just at some, not much, right? Not intensely, but somehow cloaking themselves. By them cloaking their children, then they transfer that idea, because immediately when the child is born, the child is born in his nakedness, and you start cloaking the child, right? Adam and Eve start cloaking their children. What is it? What they're transferring this idea, because the child is going to look and think, oh, there's something wrong with me by this cloaking. It's, Nate, it's not right. There's something wrong. I need to be some other self. The idea is transferred. And so it's there in some primal stage, but throughout the ages, it just gets developed and developed, centuries and centuries and centuries amongst different cultures at different times. It takes its own time to develop, and once it develops, right? Once man really starts developing it intensely, that's when you start seeing civilized structures coming up. Man really intensely transforming his environment. Man really intensely engaged in these hierarchical structures of governance and of society, in terms of establishing society. What Adam and Eve did was they introduced it and passed it on throughout mankind, throughout all history, and then it was developed more and more and more, by different cultures at different times, and it's circumstances, it's people that's involved. Because the idea is there in some primal state, maybe in some other place, among some culture, some individual might have caught on to it and felt that they should run away with it. So the idea is there. Okay. Just before I go on, sometimes this computer just sort of does this funny and funky thing where it just jumps from one slide to the other, and so I sort of lose my train of thought, or I get, we sort of break the momentum or whatever. All right, but anyway, let me just sort of finish off from the last slide. So before I get into this one, um, this idea, right, is transferred in primal stages. It goes, and it's there throughout human history. It's a part of human culture, part of human society. It's been introduced. It's all over, and in different places at different times, it is capitalized on to develop, um, civilizations and structures, and to inspire conquerors and leaders and stuff, and to inspire people, right? And create ambition, and create this sense of self, where greed is important and integral to that sense of self. All right. Now, what you have to realize with this idea, also, it removes people from, it removes innocence. And once the innocence is lost, it can't be it can't be regained. Okay? If you're in a relationship and you always trust somebody, always, totally and completely, if the person ever cheats on you even one time and you find out, you can never go back to a state of purity in that relationship, believing that this person is ever pure. Okay? So it's the same thing with this idea. Once man was woken up to flesh as a reality, and he was corrupted, his innocence was corrupted about himself and about his flesh, he can't go back to the state of purity of just walking around naked, not thinking about his body like the other animals. He'd be self-consciousness. He'd be self-conscious about his body and about the lust of flesh, and what flesh offers, the potential that flesh offers. Okay, because that's what comes with this discovery of flesh. So once that innocence is lost, it can't be regained. Once man then engages civilized existence at any level, he can't go back to his primal indigenous existence. He can't. There's no way he's going to go back to that state of being, to that order. Once Adam sinned, you notice God actually made coats of skin because their state of mind is different. They're seeing flesh. In order for them to rise to the level of spirit again, they have to cloak themselves because they're not seeing flesh. They've discovered flesh, and they can't pretend it away again. So it's best to cover themselves so they can focus on spirit. That's their opportunity to get back into spirit. Now remember what this tree is. This tree of knowledge of good and evil. Man is going to be wrestling with good and evil throughout his existence. Once man engaged that tree, right, he stepped into this world of evil, and now he's dealing with God and the devil. He's wrestling now with this throughout his whole existence. Because now God is still involved. God is still interested. God still cares. God cares enough to cloak man, but still man is not listening to God 100% because he's exposed to evil and he's always tempted by it. He's always tempted by the lust of flesh and by the aspirations that the devil is providing him. So he's in an existence where he's caught between good and evil. Before the devil came along, he was just in a realm of good and just functioning along the order that God made and God said was good, and he was contented. But the devil came along and introduced him to an idea which he accepted because there was something buried inside of him that wasn't quite right, and the devil accessed it, and he fell for it, and disconnected himself and hurt himself. So and there was a loss of innocence that comes with that. All right. Now the insecurity that man developed by chasing this idea of other self, right? He's insecure in himself. That means he's thinking he's not quite right. There's a self-consciousness that goes with that, right? Where he's checking out himself. He's all looking at himself or thinking about himself, ashamed of himself, not thinking that he's entirely appropriate, that he's right. Now, with self-consciousness, right? Anytime you're checking out yourself, you're always going to find fault, right? And of course, that must be the case because at the very root of it is the insecurity where you're chasing something else, and that's the consequence is that state of self-conscious examination, finding fault, needing to be better. That what nature provided you, what God provided you, is not appropriate. All right. So that the self-consciousness is a part of it. Now, just to close out with these definitions here, when I'm talking about consciousness, I'm referring to intellectual state. We exist in an intellectual state whereby we generate ideas. We're able to share ideas. We're able to receive ideas. We're able to process ideas. And our composite intellectual state forms that I. That's it, that conceptual sense of I, which is ego. Okay, and ego is alive as a being, a conceptual being, and remember I said we don't only exist as conceptual being, we also exist emotionally in the realm of spirit. There's a conceptual sense of self, and there's this presence of self, this I am self, that's in spirit. That. Okay, I'm sorry about that again. The computer just did it again. It just skipped away from the slide that I was on and cut off my thought what I was saying. Um, so yeah, so that's consciousness. Consciousness is that we have this conceptual sense of state. We process um, existence intellectually. Um, and so we're separated from the other animals in that sense and from everything else in existence because they don't have consciousness. Remember, God created us in his own image. He's a conscious being, right? He exists as an intellectual being, and in making us in his own image, this is what he made us: being able, conscious, being able to process ideas and to have intellectual life. And of course, with that consciousness, we have the possibility of not only choosing good but also choosing evil. And that's why God had approached us with choices. Um, and just to remind us that we have choices, and what to stray away from. Now, in terms of self-consciousness, it just comes as a result of our insecure state, right? Once you adopt this devilish view, this devil idea that you need to be some other self, and be on this ego trip, and be like God, right? So and you whatever God made you, you're not gonna accept it. So then you're by virtue of that insecure in who you are, and by virtue of being insecure, you're becoming self-conscious. You're checking out yourself. You're ashamed of it. You want better. You want some other self. You're gonna try to change it and transform it. And this is what human beings have done throughout history, upon that idea that what however nature made them isn't quite right. So they need to look at themselves with shame, and to try to transform it and do stuff to themselves because who they are isn't quite right. Now, when I talk about subconsciousness, I'm talking about our spiritual being, or our being that's beyond flesh, but that's deep within us, that's buried in what I call our perceptive corpus, right? We're able to perceive the world and become real in time and space, right? And we get this identity, this spiritual identity that God wraps up in our perception in time and space. And so that being, that spiritual being that motivates us, and that's beyond flesh, but which impacts our physical form. That's what I'm talking about when I say our subconscious being, the being that can't be analyzed, in terms of ripping up our brain and finding it. It's a spiritual being. All right. Anyway, we'll end it here for today. And again, I apologize for all these skips and whatever. I don't know. My computer just does this, and it has happened a couple of times throughout these presentations. I hope you'll bear with me and just gather um, the points that I'm trying to make. All right. Be blessed.